What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Every now and then you get a combination of Pokémon and ability that make it dominant in the competitive landscape, like Dracovish with Strong Jaw powering up its most powerful attack, or of course Protean being completely overpowered. But what about the opposite? What about Pokémon with abilities that are horribly suited for competitive play, but have different uses when actually playing through the games themselves? Because not every Pokémon's value is solely defined by their capacity to help you beat a tournament. For instance, the first thing that came to my mind with this was obviously Yamper with Ball Fetch. This ability allows this electric corgi to run and pick up one of the Pokeballs that you failed to capture with, so this is utterly useless in an online battle since you can't steal someone else's Pokemon, unable to access your Pokeballs at all. However, in the main story of the games, you'll be trying to catch Pokemon all the time, so recovering at least one of them for each time they break out of a Pokeball is a great way to recoup some of your costs. And Yamper will bring back the same kind of Pokeball that you throw, so if you're smart and use a Quick Ball at the start, but they've broken out, you can still get it back with the net zero cost to you. Although it does only work on failed captures, so you cannot farm Master Balls from this ability like I saw somebody suggest, since the Master Ball will always work. Well, at least in the games anyway. But since we're talking about capturing Pokemon, I would say this is where Mycelium Might comes in as well. This is the signature ability of the Toedscool line that is kind of meant to check them, I think, because it makes any status move go last in the turn. I guess they were just really worried about a fast Spore user, but they could have just slowed them down if they wanted. Anyway, this fungal ability also ignores any other abilities that would negate said status effects, such as poisoning a Zangoose with immunity, or even hitting a soundproof Pokemon with noise, so that's cool, but always doing it second can be detrimental in the competitive scene, because Toedscool ain't exactly the most bulky Pokemon around, so losing 2/3 of your health on the first turn just for a confusion or a terrain might be too much of a trade-off. However, in the main game, it's not nearly as crucial to go faster, especially when trying to catch a rare Pokemon, or pay even a shiny. You can afford to let your mushroom get chipped away at a little bit when you know that you'll successfully put to sleep a Pokemon with insomnia. It's a bit more niche, but anecdotally, I was able to use my Toedscool for this sort of thing quite effectively during my time in Paldea. But sometimes there are abilities that have little to no relevance but make sense on a thematic level, like Bagon having Rockhead, despite lacking recoil moves to take advantage of it anytime it is a Bagon. However, its durable cranium does resemble Rock in appearance and function, so I can see why it's here. I only bring this up because of the abilities Heavy Metal and Light Metal that are almost never necessary on any Pokemon, but they are quite fitting to be on different steel types. Of course, Heavy Metal doubles the Pokemon's weight, whereas the opposite ability Light Metal cuts it in half. So that is interesting, but there are only like half a dozen moves that interact with weight in the entire franchise, so it's not exactly worth going all in on the weight changes for competitive battle. But in a lower pressure playthrough, it could actually come up. In several early game locations, a favorite move of low-level Pokemon is Low Kick, or even Grass Knot to an extent, which can really hurt heavier targets. But if you have Light Metal, you could significantly reduce that damage, which is especially nice for the fighting type Low Kick. And the opposite goes for Heavy Metal, which can benefit you with the move Heavy Slam, making you way much more to increase damage on even hefty targets on that stab steel type attack. Something that's inconsequential in the official competition becomes a fun incidental when experienced through casual play. Now, an ability that is very limited in online battling is Pickpocket. You might think that stealing an item would be invaluable, but that's the thing. Items are a huge part of the competitive Pokemon scene, and this ability only works when you don't have a hold item already. So how many people are going to forego a useful item on their own in order to maybe steal a crucial item from an opponent, but also possibly grabbing a detrimental one like maybe they had a Flame Orb for Guts or something? However, in randomly playing the game, you may not even need or want to have an item at all times, so then you can have the nice surprise of accidentally snatching items off of wild Pokemon without even having to capture them to see what they've got. If you absolutely must deprive a foe of their item, you'd be better served with Knockoff or even Thief, because Pickpocket works much better as an occasional bonus rather than crafting the whole Pokemon's identity around it. But of course, as for item-related abilities, Pickup is the ultimate for casual players. This ability is fairly useless in battle, however when you walk around the overworld your Pokemon will collect items as you progress. Not everything that can be picked up is overly useful, but a super potion here and a revive there really adds up so that you don't have to spend as much money. And even better, you can sell all of the items that you don't want, even sometimes randomly receiving a nugget. And my favorite thing about this ability is, even though pickup is mostly on base stage Pokemon that you wouldn't raise up to a high level, if you do, it'll draw in truly impressive items like a free leftovers, TMs like Earthquake, Evolution Stones, and even more recently, Bottle Caps, which are incredibly rare otherwise. So just because some Pokemon are not cut out to be all-stars, doesn't mean that they can't be the best there is at what they do. Next, I wanted to zoom in on the ability Tinted Lens, which is actually quite good. It allows not very effective attacks to hit for neutral damage. And who wouldn't want that? You would have nothing resist you. But the issue comes from the kinds of Pokemon that get this ability, mostly being weaker bug types that aren't too popular for their offensive firepower. And there are some other flying types that get it as their hidden ability. I'll give you that Hisuian Braviary could be quite powerful, but Sigilyph is more designed for support anyway, so Tinted Lens is not really able to get its full due in the competitive realm. However, in the standard game, it is considerably easier to get away with using such Pokemon, where a Butterfree can last you all the way to the Elite Four if you want it to, and if you have Tinted Lens, these lackluster bugs will be able to contribute all the more, and actually get a chance to shine against the weaker NPCs rather than flounder against top-tier players. And speaking of limited accessibility, we've got Liquid Ooze, which is a bit narrow in effect, but it makes any health-draining attack used against you actually have the opponent lose HP instead. So not a bad trick, but the only Pokemon that can have it are the Tentacool and Gulpin lines, so clearly a poison-exclusive characteristic, but then that begs the question, is anybody really going to bother using resisted attacks against poison types anyway? I guess you could try to predict a drain and pivot in one of these two options, but realistically you would get more mileage out of Liquid Ooze in playing any random region, with their copious amounts of grass types sapping energy all the time. Or hey, at the very least you'd be able to stop all the Zubats sucking the life out of you to heal themselves and hurt them instead. I'm honestly surprised that more Pokemon don't have Liquid Ooze, but you'll get more bang for your buck if you use it where draining attacks are thrown around far more freely. Now, one ability that we're all likely familiar with is Damp. This is the trait that prevents any Pokemon from using exploding moves like, well, Explosion or Self-Destruct, but that's pretty much all it does. Despite the name, it doesn't boost water attacks or anything, even if water does mostly get it, so for competitive battles, even in a pinch, if you have to go down in a blaze of glory, you're far more likely to see something else like Memento or Healing Wish to actually benefit your team instead of offing yourself just to have a ghost type switch in and feel nothing. And I'll admit that Damp isn't that much more effective in a regular game, but higher than 0 is still an improvement. At least in a playthrough, you can put a stop to all the numerous Graveler blowing themselves up everywhere, and it's extra nice to ensure that a shiny Pokemon won't eliminate themselves before you get a chance to capture them. However, Damp is actually even better than I thought because it also somehow counters Aftermath. You know, that super annoying ability all over Sinnoh that'll kill your Pokemon out of spite? You could just not deal with taking that excess damage at the end of the battle, which is pretty great. I always thought of Aftermath as more of a malevolent grudge sort of thing, but I guess it's secretly an explosion. So you're better off trying Damp in the story, where you'll experience Aftermath and explosions far more frequently than a structured battle where you're not likely to see either. But lastly, I wanted to focus on the ability Normalize. This is one of the most notorious abilities that people call useless because it takes every attack of the Pokemon and turns them into the normal type. Usually it's the other way around with abilities like Pixelate or Galvanize causing normal attacks to take on the power of other types, and you can see how that would be more valuable since normal can be easily countered. However, I'm here to say that Normalize can be an incredibly useful ability, just not a competitive. The signature ability of the Skitty line is written off as only being good for, say, paralyzing a ground type with Thunder Wave, and it can do that, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, firstly, yes, I realize that this would make these felines totally ineffective against ghosts. That is true, but beyond that, I feel like people are intentionally ignoring the 20% power boost that all of the attacks get from said ability. And since Delcatty is a normal type, that gives every attack in the entire game that same type attack boost. Sure, it won't be super effective anymore, but you can now actually use Shadow Ball on other normal types, and you could still get that special defense drop because these attacks don't lose their extra effects when converted to normal. And really, players would probably love this ability if it were on Pokemon Pokemon with even wider move pools to pull off even crazier tricks. Personally, when I had a normalized Skitty in Oros, I taught it the TM for Blizzard to give it a strong attack. And after having it sit on its hands for Phoebe in the Elite Four, we got to Glacia and she almost immediately set up Hail. This meant that I now had a 120 base power attack with 2 power boosts that was guaranteed to hit because of what her Pokemon did. And the best part was that none of her Pokemon were able to resist it because it was a normal type move and no longer ice. So the very thing that makes people disparage this ability was the key factor in ensuring that Delcatty could run a clean sweep through every member of her team. And I'm sure that sort of thing could happen against untold numbers of NPCs in a standard game, so just because an ability may be limited or considered a detriment in competitive play doesn't mean that you have to abandon the Pokemon in every context. Clearly not everyone is fit for the big leagues, but hopefully I've shown you that in the proper ecosystems, pretty much any ability can have certain benefits. So which disregarded abilities do you find the most helpful outside of competitive? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.